Hello everyone, welcome to another race analysis video with Mo Allen. In this race, I am racing with my teammates and coach in the watts per kilogram racing team, the WTRL 24-25 season round 3 race 1, which is a team time trial on the Wasted 8 route. So we're racing in the Open Americas B, Eastern B division. The route is 30.9 kilometers with 144 meters of elevation. So we have 6 riders, a full team to start here. We actually didn't realize that the max start number of riders to start for the team were 6. So we actually had planned for 2 or 3 more riders actually to ride if they could have, just to get some experience with team time trials. None of us have that much experience with team time trials. So this was a really, really good learning experience. So we have 6 riders to start here. Different skill, power levels. So there's a couple of Bs, there's so I think there are 3 Bs, 2 Cs, and a D maybe? I forget, but all different skill levels. So our coach, Dan Corridor, who's on the front here and pulling, he set a plan for us. The plan was that only 3 of us would ever pull at the front, those being me, him, Dan Corridor, and Galen McNaughton. The rest of the riders would sit in and stay in the draft. We assumed that possibly 2 riders might not be able to make it the entire distance. So we know that we needed 4 riders to finish. So we had our plan for that, to make that happen. So to at least get 4 to finish. So we knew that we had to sort of make sure that the 4th rider with the lowest power output, that we made sure that they stayed with us and came across the line. So this was a really, really good learning experience. It was actually kind of frustrating. I've said it before, this first half, or the first part of this ride, actually probably more than the first part, more than half of it, it was really played to my not understanding the dynamics of drafting, which I've mentioned in previous videos, and it really, it sort of frustrated me in the beginning here, because I didn't quite understand what I was supposed to do, or what I know that, with more practice, I've watched many teams, like high-level riders and teams do these exact WTRL TTTs, and obviously, it's possible to have a well-formed and good line and good tactics, but it was just lost on me. I spent a lot of this ride just trying to figure out how to stay in the on the wheel of the rider I was supposed to be on. So you'll see here, I'm not supposed to be this far back. I'm always supposed to be, at this point in the first 10 miles, I'm supposed to be behind Galen. And actually, no, sorry. I was supposed to be behind Jordan for the first 10 miles. Here you can see a critical mistake when I ramped up into zone 5 and went through everyone and had to, I probably shouldn't have stopped pedaling, but I decided to stop pedaling and then I had to get back in. So I was kind of all over the place in the beginning here. It's also, I'll mention too, that despite it being frustrating, the beginning was easy for me, right? Like you can see my heart rate at 118. And that for me, that's low. That's super low. So here I was just trying to figure out how to stay on the wheel of Jordan. So a couple of things. One thing I knew again from watching other teams, but hadn't remembered and realized until a little bit into this ride, was that the watts per kilogram targets that Dan had set were really only for the person in the front pulling, right? So if Dan is supposed to have been pulling at, let's say, 3.2 watts a kilogram, that means nothing for what I have to do to stay on the wheel of the rider in front of me. And I think going into this, I was anchoring. There I go again with getting off the pedals there. So we were, well, let me finish my thought. So I was anchored to this idea of that watts per kilogram target and thinking, oh, okay, I'll just try to stay, if that's what the target is for those first 10 miles, then that's kind of the target I need to hit. And I quickly realized that number isn't for the people in the back. So I had to adjust there. It was really hard for me to understand, and I still don't understand it, how to stay, like where I'm supposed to be to stay in the draft. I realized, so I had been seeing other riders have different like configuration for the values that are displaying under the watts on the top left there, the RPM, the heart rate, the stress points, and the average power for the ride. For the first time, before this ride, I found those settings and I changed it to stress points, but I wish it was before it was like kilojoules or whatever, which was completely useless to me. I realized though, with this ride, and I changed it after this ride, what would have helped me a lot is for when I took up my pools, was to have the watts per kilogram number up there, because finding my watts per kilogram in the rider list, although obviously my name is highlighted there, it was I don't know how much better it would have been if that number was up there. I just feel like it being bigger maybe would have helped. We can talk about my pulls once it gets time for me to pull. That happens towards the second half. But yeah, this was interesting. So I really couldn't figure out how to stay close to Jordan, who I'm supposed to be with here. So, I know that this takes practice and will get better with time, but just like I say with the power-ups, how when you hit the power-up, to me, I really don't feel the effect of it. It's almost as if there's no difference between me hitting it and not hitting it. I know that something different is happening. I know that it's affecting the speed and what my avatar is doing, but sitting there on the bike, it doesn't register to me. And it's the same way I feel like with this drafting. And even though we're all on TT bikes, drafting is enabled for everyone in your team, but not for other teams. So it was really, really eye-opening to try to fit in here. And so I've been riding with Dan and Elizabeth Corridor, who's in the group. She was supposedly placed behind me, and I told her I apologized that she had to be behind me and try to keep up with my erratic riding. She did well. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned it, but we were on Discord voice. So Dan is calling out instructions the entire time on Discord, which was super helpful, super helpful. We had tried Discord before. We have a Discord server for the team, and we had tried it before, but the way I used it before, I would basically have the Discord app running on the phone and the phone speaker, just, the sound coming from the phone speaker with the volume all the way up, and sort of have the phone sitting on my laptop. I run Zwift on a laptop. With all the ambient noise in the garage with either the bike or the fan or anything else, it was just super hard to hear. I don't think the mic was picking up my voice all that well. So I did a trial run with Dan the night before this ride. This ride was done on a Wednesday at 7:45 p.m. And just to see how running the Discord app on the computer would work, and that worked well. So we're on Discord taking instructions from Dan here. So here we are. This line looks good right here, coming down off of Jarvis KOM. I really have to, my rider weight, I'm the heaviest rider of the group. You can see me backing off there. I am 95 kilograms. There I go, getting off the pedals again. So we have a wide variety of weights here from, probably 120 or 130 pounds all the way up to my 212 pounds or whatever. So there's a lot of dynamics going on here, a lot of different experience levels. Oh, I mentioned that. So a while ago, I'd been riding with Dan for a while, I mentioned, and we had tried with a couple of the team members who couldn't make it because it was capped at 6. Years ago, we had tried some team time trial practice. But in between then and now, I'd never done a TTT. So this was, we actually weren't even sure that we were going to be able to compete in this race because the race pass on the WTRL site wasn't active until, I believe, 2 days before the race. So we all kind of scrambled and said, hey, can we make it? Can we make it? So it turns out, we had a good turnout, and we're glad we did it. So yeah, so here I'm still supposed to be behind Jordan. You can see Jordan's at the back here and coming up through. So I found myself surging a lot. I'm not sure. I'm really interested in Dan watching this video. He streamed his race on Twitch. You can follow him. His coaching program is in the link in the description of this video, and he also streams as Watts XKG on Twitch. I haven't watched his video yet, but I'm very curious to see how he was able to stay in the draft after he came off the front pulling. Because this power output from me seems erratic and spiky, but I don't know. Maybe that's normal. I'm not sure. I did not feel comfortable at all. This first go, I was actually happy to get on the front and pull where I could just try to stay at a certain wattage. Although, and we'll talk about it once we get to when I start pulling, it was difficult for me to stay, and I don't know if I should have expected for this to be any different, but when I was pulling, and let's say my target was 3.4 watts a kilogram, and again, I'm just then pinning my gaze on my watts per kilogram in the rider list. I didn't have any bike computer like going in the garage, so all I had to go on was the watts per kilogram in the rider list. It was difficult to stay in that range. I probably averaged that watts per kilogram if I had to guess. I have no idea. I'm sure I got close, but I'm wondering if I needed to be in a harder gear to be more consistent with my watts per kilogram, or an easier gear and spinning higher. Probably not. So I'm really curious. At the end, I was in my hardest gear and ran out of gears. That's burying the, or not burying the lead, that's divulging the lead a little too much, but it's a little premature. So anyway, here we are. We're trying to settle in here. I should not be on the back here again. I should be right behind Jordan. So just trying to settle in here still. So, you know, at this point, my power output average is low for me, 192 watts. That's less than 2 watts a kilogram. You see my heartbeat at 130 beats, which again is relatively low for me, 16 minutes in. So Dan did a really, really good job of setting the targets and making sure that everyone was safe up until it was time to really push. It's funny too. At this point, I was thinking, wow, this is and it is. It was quite easy, and I was wondering what it was going to be like by the time I got to pool, and it was quite something by the time I got there. I told Dan afterwards that he did a really good job of making sure that everyone conserved their energy, because he set the targets well, and I was at my limit pretty quickly. Like the switch flipped a lot quicker than I expected, coming from it being, again, at this point relatively easy to it being really, really, really hard. It was a good solid effort. So we're doing well at this point, as well as to be expected for not having a few minutes of practice as a team, basically right before this ride. And so, and Dan is constantly talking to us on Discord, telling us to, calling out the people who are behind and where gaps are open or closed. I actually wanted to ask him if he was using the regular third person view or if he was switching views to be able to see where the gaps were. So here you can see me coming a little too far to the front and then backing off a little too far to the back on the uphill. That wasn't too bad actually, but you can see me spiking there because the rider that I'm supposed to be behind came up. I think at this point, so where are we? 10 points. No, I think at this point I'm still supposed to be behind Jordan. I'm behind Galen here, and you see me going in front of Galen. So I think at this point I'm still supposed to be behind Jordan. At a certain point, we switch it to me being behind Galen, but I think that doesn't happen for a little bit. So we're doing well here. I'm thinking of, again, here my thoughts are with the fact that Elizabeth Corridor has to deal with my erratic riding, and I'm just trying to be more consistent, and I'm wondering how the other riders are faring. You can see my heart rate now up towards 150, average for the 20 minutes, still around 2 watts a kilogram for me, which is, again, definitely on the easier side. So, at this point, I had actually wondered how difficult this was for other people who had different power output. So I was just trying to be a good teammate and make sure that I could stay in my lines. Again, here we're getting a little bit out. Like I said, I've watched a lot of these rides where people stay. Obviously they're very highly skilled and very practiced in this particular type of riding, but it's interesting to see the differences between rookies and vets, basically, for this kind of discipline. So here we are, we're getting through. I think probably at this point we're all sort of settling in. I believe at this point at a certain point earlier than was planned, Dan told Jordan to fall back and for me to be behind Galen, and I think that might be, I'm not sure if that's this point or not. But you can see that I am actually behind Galen for a while here. So I think this might be where that switch happens. At 10 miles, the plan was for Dan to fall back and Galen to go in front and me to stay on Galen's wheel. Galen had a power target. So I think that's going to happen coming up pretty soon here. But we're settling in, again, doing well for our first go at this, and just trying to be consistent. I think I've mentioned it before. I actually just thought of this. I don't know that I thought of this while I was riding, but sometimes that graph at the bottom can color my perception in negative ways. You'll see me in a lot of my videos often turn it off, disable the graph, the display of the graph on climbs, so that I don't let it influence what I'm supposed to be doing. If I see that I may be in the red longer than I thought I would be, maybe it would cause me to think that I need to back off when I really don't. Or if I see that it's erratic as it is now, maybe it'll cause me to think something that isn't actually true. So the next time we start this, I probably will turn that graph off. I think it's doing more harm than good. Definitely more so when I'm in the draft and not on the front. I would probably enable it on the front because it helps me, again, not having an average watts per kilogram for any period. That is an indication of how consistent I was over a certain period, and the only indication, right? So that will help in those situations, I think. But otherwise, for this kind of ride, I think it probably was less useful having it enabled. So here you can see this is where Dan falls back and Galen goes in front, and I'm staying on Galen's wheel. So I think that being second wheel, I had a little bit of an easier time sticking with on the wheel of the rider in front. Still not perfect by any means at all, but just a little easier. We're picking up the power now. I forget Galen's target here. I think it might have been 3.2, I want to say. I believe it was 3.2, and Dan was adjusting it as we go on. So he would change it from the plan based on where we are. And again, did a really good job calling out. The other thing to mention is you can see here as I'm like on the right side of two riders who are behind each other. So Chris is behind me, and Galen's in front, and I'm sort of on the right there, and I'm going a little in front of Galen here, which I shouldn't be. And again, going back to me saying that I don't understand the dynamics of like what it takes to fall in line in the draft. Like, aren't I close enough here to the rider in front to be right behind them? Why am I off to the right? Now, maybe now, no, or maybe, I don't know. But in my mind, I'm like, well, how, like, what do I need to do to be like right behind them? I didn't understand why I was off to the right. It almost made me think early on in Zwift. Again, I've been on Zwift since the beta days, since 2015, I think. And early on, I remember putting in a support case about this, I think. I would always wonder, let me see if I can remember this. I would always wonder, why is it that the rider, like some riders would be standing and others wouldn't when they were climbing? Now, part of that is due to just the way that the power output is done. Again, see here, I'm off to the right a little bit, even though, and I'm a little behind him. Let's see when I get up closer. So I do fall in kind of behind him, but again, I don't understand that. Anyway, early on, there was a bug about how you would view what the riders were doing. And here again, I go off to the right, and I don't understand why. Like, am I still in the draft? Am I benefiting from it here? Like, to me, I cannot tell at all. Is this good or is this bad? Should I be trying to improve this? Should I be increasing just a little bit? I think I'm a little far from him. The other thing is that one of our riders, I think it was either Chris or Jordan, said that they eventually put it in first-person mode or first-person view, which is something that I do when I do my pacer bot rides. I'll put it in first-person view and just try to stick as close to that rider as I can. I actually have a little game that I play in my head where I will try to be so close to them that I can't see their back wheel. You know how all the bots have bright bikes with bright wheels, and I try to be so close to them that I can't see their back wheel. So I was considering putting it in first person mode here. I think it definitely would have helped me stay on the wheel of the rider ahead of me. I was afraid that it would hurt me knowing what was going on behind. So here we can see I'm in front here taking my turn, and I'm supposed to be doing 3.4. I'm almost sure. So I'm looking here and I'm trying to keep my watts per kilogram in the rider list on right there with my highlighted rider, Curtis Malone Smith, at 3.4. And I'm not able to keep it like consistent, that number at 3.4 at all. I'm going from, like 2.7 to 3.6 or 7 or 8. So this is an instance where the graph sort of helped me understand that I probably was still averaging somewhere around where I wanted to, but it was frustrating not being able to get that consistency. I felt a little bit like I was letting the team down in front here. I actually haven't talked to Dan about this at all yet, but I don't know how well I did in the front at all. I don't know how well I did in the entire race in terms of my positioning and my output. But here I was trying my hardest just to get into a rhythm where I could have that number stay around 3.4, maybe 3.3 or 3.5, and maybe I'm being unrealistic about being able to do that. But again, in my mind, my eyes are pinned to that number, and I'm trying to stay at that number until Dan tells me to do something different. That's just what I'm trying to do. So here we are, 33 minutes in, 10.5 kilometers to go, and I'm finally on the front taking my pull, and it's starting to get real now, right? It's no longer necessarily easy. I know that given that there's only 3 of us that are trying to pull the team along, that we're having relatively long pulls. So you'll see me sort of change my body position on the bike there and just try to get comfortable. I tried to not waste body movement. I'm still rocking a little bit there, but when I have the composure to stay to stay consistent in my body movement and efficient, I try to do it as much as I can. So here we are. I've been pulling for a little bit here and, doing relatively well, I think. Again, wanting that number to be more consistent in terms of the watts per kilogram that are showing in the rider list. And I'm just constantly trying to get there. This last, few seconds were pretty good, but there I am down to 2.9. And so it was an interesting experience, for the half hour being in the draft and trying to stay on someone's wheel, two different people's wheels. And then now it's like a different ball game altogether, being on the front. I definitely felt more comfortable here. I'm happy that people were able to stay on my wheel. I was a little concerned that Galen had to go up over 4, you can see him there, up over 4 watts a kilogram sometimes to stay with me. I was concerned that he was pushing too hard. So here Dan told me to go up to 3.6, I want to say, or maybe even 4. Let's see where I go. This might have been, so it's hard to tell, right? Because I don't think this was this 4 yet? I don't think this was 4. I think this was supposed to be 3.6 at this point. There's a point here too, I think it happens after we get out of these tunnels where, maybe it's here. I think it was there actually. I couldn't hear if Dan said that he was coming through or not. And I think another one of our teammates let me know on Discord that Dan said he was coming through. So there's my pull done. And now I'm just staying on the wheel of Dan, who's in front, and waiting for further instructions here. So here, Dan's pull is done, and he's told Galen to go in the front and sit at a certain target. And so now I'm marking Galen's wheel. Again, off to the right here, and I don't quite understand why. Am I out of the draft? Am I in the draft? Do I need to be just a little further back to be in the draft? I literally have no idea. So I was just, and I don't know if being in first person would have helped me to be closer to his wheel, because like my rider's body is obscuring my front wheel, right? So it's like, I don't really know how close I am to him, how close my front wheel is to his. Right here is good, right? But when it goes out of the draft or goes left or right, whether that's out of the draft or not, I didn't understand at all why. So here we are doing pretty well, staying behind Galen. I didn't mention it, but Elizabeth, she dropped back at around 35 minutes, I think. She did really, really well. So here I am going back in the front, and I believe now my target is 4 watts a kilogram. I'm pretty sure on the front here. We've got 6.4 kilometers to go. We're 40 minutes in, and it's getting tough on the front. I think here, still kind of composed and just trying to make sure I can get that 4 watts a kilogram and not make people behind me work more than they have to, and just try to be consistent on the front. I can't remember exactly how I was feeling at this point. But I think it was getting tough, and I knew that I probably had a long pull ahead of me. And again, now looking at this and remembering, I think the graph being off here would have helped, because it just shows me how long I've been in that red zone, right, in that zone 5. And I don't think that did me any favors, right? It's like it's a double-edged sword, because it does help to see the consistency, as I mentioned before, in terms of my average over a certain period. But on the downside, again, it's just showing me how long I've been pushing a high rate, and I don't think that did me any favors at this point. So I'm going to see whether or not that watts per kilogram, well, that's not really going to help me. I was going to say the watts per kilogram that displays in the little section of information on the top left there. It's not going to be an average, and it's not going to show me my watts per kilogram over time, so I don't really think that's a replacement for anything. So it was Elizabeth there giving me some encouragement. That really helped, actually. It was surprising that she was messaging me, and it really helped. Here, I think my target is still 4 watts a kilogram at this point. He may have bumped it up a little bit, but you can see me dipping below, down to 3.6 at times, 3.8 there. So this was getting tough here. We got 4.6 kilometers to go, and I wasn't sure exactly how long I was going to be on the front, so I was just trying to settle in, get some consistent revolutions, and stay on the power. Here, I don't remember what gear I'm in. This is likely my second to hardest gear. I'm spinning around 87 RPM. This is likely my second to hardest gear, I believe. Let's see, we see Dan coming up beside me. I'm not sure if he's coming through here. Looks like he is. Yeah, I back off. This might have been actually where I couldn't hear him. I think this is where I couldn't hear him. And they told me, yeah, I see me talking there. And they told me that he said he was coming through. I said it was earlier, but this is where I believe. So at this point, I was sure I was going to take another pull. And am I going back to the front here, or am I just trying to stay on Dan's wheel? It looks like I'm just trying to stay on Dan's wheel here. You can see me drinking there. So my hydration for this, I had 15 minutes before the race started. So we see Galen coming back through here. I think Dan was calling out for Galen to do like 4.2-ish maybe at this point. So 15 minutes before the ride, I had my Infinite 90-gram fructose blend. It's a powdered blend with 20 ounces of water from Infinite Nutrition. So I drank that, and then during the ride, I just had a water bottle that I would drink occasionally. When I was pulling, I didn't really want to drink because it messes up my rhythm and my output whenever I take a drink. So you can see me here buckling down. You can see my stance changing on the bike there because Dan is yelling at this point saying, like, come on, Curtis, like 4 point, I think here is supposed to be like 4.2 maybe. Whatever he was calling out, I wasn't quite able to hit it at this point. I was like kind of right below it. It was definitely tough at this point. Tougher than before. It was tough before this as well, but I think this was like 4.2-ish, which I occasionally hit, occasionally go over. Most of the time I'm under, I think, on average, although I'm curious. So you can see another encouragement there from Elizabeth. I have to say, it's we did not expect 5 people to be in the group at this point. We expected that we would have only 4. So big kudos, big shout out to the entire team, right? Jordan, Chris, Galen, Dan, Elizabeth, everyone did a great job. So here Dan is calling out some numbers, and I don't think I'm able to hit them. Like now I'm sort of going backwards, I believe. I think I'm in my hardest gear here, and if you see, I don't know if it was that point there, that little dip in power, but at a certain point I was struggling to produce power in that gear. So I said, let me dial it back a bit and see if I can spin up and produce the power. It might have been here. No, I think it happens a little further on. Here I'm really struggling to produce the power. You can see my body language change. And just as Elizabeth is saying last mile there, Dan is saying, come on, Curtis, last mile. Like I'm supposed to take this home here, and you can see me buckling down there. It's getting tough, and I'm not. I think here I tried to change gears and then change back into my harder gear to produce the power, and I wasn't able to do it. I'm fading here, right almost to the end. I got almost to the end. Here I'm really just having trouble producing the power. I'm all over the place, kind of. And so you'll see, I think people start to pass me here and sort of take the team home. There's a really good effort here. Here I'm just trying to stay as much as I can with the group and finish with everyone. You'll see that I think when we turn up here, I fall back a little bit, or a lot, I forget. But this was a really eye-opening experience. You can see everyone trying to, or sort of going past me here. I'm struggling to keep with them back in my hardest gear and just trying to stay on the power here. There's that gap I talked about, and Dan is saying, close the gap, and I'm trying, but it's tough. So all in all, yeah, I think Dan did a really good job of organizing this, again, for a team of 6 riders, and there were going to be 9 of us that he was going to coach through this whole thing. It worked out really well in the end for the team, for a good experience. And you'll see the results here in a minute. It's really interesting that my average watts per kilogram were, you can see there, 2.8. Right now the other team members aren't showing, but we're going to show them on the Zwift power results. So you can see here there's the WTRL results, 6 points for the team, so yay us. So you can see Jordan there actually had, a couple of riders had a lower watts per kilogram than I did, but it's a really good effort. Very glad that we were able to organize and get this done. Again, big shout out to the team. And we'll see about the Zwift Racing League. You know, it's sort of, we didn't think that we were going to be like, they enabled our team, because the race pass didn't get enabled until so late. So we'll have to see where this fits in. We didn't have this in the plan necessarily, but if we have some individual races coming up, we'll the next one, I understand, is like a points race. Here you can see my power output here, sort of tale of two halves. Anyway, I appreciate it. Hope you liked the video. Let me know what you think. WTRL, definitely interesting. Team time trial, definitely interesting. And looking forward to the next one. Appreciate it, and I will talk to you all later.